Okay. All right. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to our first virtual of 2022. So we have a lot of familiar faces here that I see and some new faces as well, which is absolutely awesome. So for anybody new, my name is Chelsea. I am part of the awesome hospitality team here at Scheid Vineyards. I like to say that my job is just to make sure that our glasses are full and that we keep drinking. But some people here probably want to learn a thing or two about what we are drinking, and that is what the lovely winemaker, Miss Marta, is here for.
Hi, everybody. It's really great to see all your faces and wonderful to be able to share a glass of wine together this evening.
Awesome. So today's tasting is going to consist of 3 wines that we just released this month, and that is exclusive to all you club members. So we're going to start with the 2021 Sauvignon Blanc, move on to the 2019 Merlot, and then we're going to finish off with the brand new 2018 Reserve Cabernet Franc. So we chose these 3 wines to keep with a sort of Bordeaux style theme. All these grapes are grown in that region of in France. And so that is kind of why we chose those 3 wines to drink through today. And definitely remember, you guys have a really awesome opportunity today where you can ask the winemaker questions. So don't be shy, use the chat button to comment, to ask questions. We'll do our best to answer things live as we go along. Even those who come in the tasting room, we don't normally see the winemaker sitting there. So this is a really fun thing for us to get to do. And we even have a few trivia questions today for you guys that we're going to throw your way and give out a prize or 2. I think that is enough of the housekeeping. So what we'll do is we'll start drinking. How about
that? All right. So we're going to start off with our 2021 Sauvignon Blanc. Love the sound. All right, so this is 100% Sauvignon Blanc, and this is a blend from several of our vineyards down in Monterey County. So cheers, everybody.
Cheers. All righty. Okay. And if everyone sees my background, as we go ahead and we sip on this for a minute or so, I am going to take everybody back a bit to the year 1972. And I wasn't born then, so I had to write down a little bit about it. But 1972 is the year that Elvis Presley came out with Burning Love. It's the year the original Godfather was released. HBO made its premiere, and a bottle of Camus sold for $4.50. It was also the year a man named Al Scheid set his roots in Monterey County. And at that time, wine growing was definitely in its infancy here in Monterey County. And we called Scheid Family Wines Monterey Farming Corporation. So over the past few decades, Scheid has definitely morphed into a lot more than it was in 1972. With a 70-mile stretch of vineyards planted down the Salinas Valley, we have over 35 planted varieties now, 2 tasting rooms, a 400-foot wind turbine. And so I think to say Al's dream has come a long way would probably be an understatement. So I wanted to kind of start off today just because it's a really exciting year for us. We are celebrating Scheid Vineyards' 50th anniversary. So definitely want to start off with a cheers to 50 years. Oh,
cheers to 50 years.
Okay. So let's go ahead and dive into the delicious Sauvignon Blanc, Marta. Rumor has it that this might be one of your favorite varieties.
Well, as many of you might know, white aromatic wines are some of my favorite wines. And a couple of years ago, I did a presentation for the Carmel Library, and it was a panel of winemakers. And I asked everyone, if you were stranded on a desert island that happened to have refrigeration, and you could only take one wine, what would that be? And I was really surprised that everybody else on the panel took heavy red wines. And my choice was the Sauvignon Blanc. I just felt that I could drink it for longer and never get tired of the flavors, the crisp acidity, aromatics, and it would just be more refreshing on a deserted island as well.
Yeah, definitely that nice acidity. I'm gonna go head out on a limb here and say I think this would be refreshing on any island, probably just not the deserted ones. I'm happy to take a friend with me. As we sip on this, can you tell me a little bit about the 2021, the Sauvignon Blanc? Can you tell me about the variety itself?
So the variety is thought to be indigenous to France, somewhere is in the central Loire Valley. And it is actually a genetic sibling of Chenin Blanc and Gruner Veltliner. And one of the reasons that we chose all these varieties today is that they are all related in one form or another. For instance, an ancient spontaneous cross of Sauvignon Blanc with Cabernet Franc gave us Cabernet Sauvignon.
Sorry, I'm swallowing here.
Mhm.
When you mentioned that, and I know when we originally talked about doing these three wines, I've always thought of Cabernet as being kind of like, you think of it as the father grape, right? So it's hard to imagine Sauvignon Blanc is actually its parent.
Yeah, and if we ever really do go down the path of grapevine history, it would actually be to the Traminer grapes that sort of led to everything else. I mean, you can see, if you take a look at this diagram, you can see that it really gets kind of complicated.
I'm looking at this diagram right now.
Traminer
Yeah,
in
so
the middle.
you can see a little further south on this diagram here, you've got the Sauvignon Blanc, the Cab Franc Merlot, and they all fit in kind of in the same family, which is super interesting. So how did French grapes make its way to Monterey?
So Sauvignon Blanc was first brought to California in the 1870s, and it was done so because the Sauterne style wines were very popular at the time, and those are a sweet dessert style wines. And so the California winemakers wanted to make something similar.
So for anybody that might not know, and I'm curious, feel free to type in the chat if you guys have had a Sauterne style Sauvignon Blanc, but what does that style mean?
So Sauternes are late harvest wines that are produced in the Bordeaux region, and they're usually Sauvignon Blanc or Semillon, and they are infected with botrytis, or what's called noble rot. And botrytis is a fungus that infects the berries while they're growing, and it needs very specific conditions. So as the berries start to ripen, what it does is it shrivels the berries and concentrates all the sugars, and it gives these late harvest wines some really very distinct flavors. One of the most famous Sauternes is Chateau Yquem from Bordeaux. And at this time in California, they wanted to try and make these sweet late harvest wines. However, when they brought the grapes over to California, our region is a little bit drier, and they didn't have such luck with making botrytized sweet late harvest wines. So we just ended up with the Sauvignon Blanc.
So the Chateau d'Yquem too is not a cheap bottle of wine, I'm sure.
No, no.
I can't say I've had it.
Only a couple bottles in my life.
Okay. But when we're talking about this, I do think of botrytis being in California. I think of here in Monterey, we've got super foggy and cooler conditions that you would think could lead to that.
We do, but most growers here kind of think of it as being a vineyard problem. It's not considered desirable in all varieties, and it can really lead to a lot of secondary rots. And I think I have a picture of some grapes that have been infected with botrytis, and you can see it's not a pretty picture. My first thought is that some grower made wine out of sheer utter desperation, and ended up with something fantastic. So botrytis can occur naturally, like it does here in some regions, and some people have tried to induce botrytis in vineyards with very limited success. It's just a little bit too dry in some areas, and it doesn't yield the same type of results in California as it does in Bordeaux.
It's not that pretty looking. That's
No, it's not very pretty looking.
Sometimes, like when I've been able to go to harvest, and I might sneak a berry or two, but I think I would leave this one until after it's been taken care of. And it's super interesting when I think of this kind of noble rot, because it's something that could either be super special and sort of sought at, but it's also something that could, ruin a crop.
That is really true. And it's something that growers really have to keep an eye on throughout the year.
And so another Sauvignon Blanc kind of fun fact, and I'm curious if anybody wants to type in the chat if they knew this or not, but I found out recently that California was responsible for the Sauvignon Blanc plantings that are in New Zealand. And I always thought of New Zealand sort of being the OG of Sauvignon Blanc.
Well, the early importations into California originally originated from the Chateau Yquem, and they ended up at the University of California Davis grape collection. So when the fledgling New Zealand wine industry reached out to the university to ask for some varieties that might actually do well in their climate, the university sent along what is now known as Sauvignon Blanc Clone 1 in 1968. And the rest is history.
All right, well, nobody said that they agreed with me that they didn't know that. So apparently every single person here knew that fact.
Good for you.
But let's go ahead. Let's talk a little bit about aromas for what we're drinking right now. So I get a lot of citrus, some pear, a little bit of pineapple even, and then some fresh herb. What do you get out of this?
There's so many different tropical notes, citrus, stone fruit, and I get this slight fresh herbal characteristic and some bell pepper characteristics as well. I really love the crisp acidity of this wine. And as people know, they used to call me the acid queen at work because I love acidic white wines. So I often keep a bottle of this in the freezer because the colder the wine is, the more it increases your perception to acidity. So mine's going to go back in the freezer after we talk about this. That was also one of the reasons that I asked about having refrigeration on that deserted island, because I would love to have it cold.
Well, thank you, Susan, and thank you, Todd, who were brave enough to say that was a new fact they learned. I do appreciate that. Speaking of questions, I actually have two questions. One is, if you really like it super cold, would you put ice in your Sauvignon Blanc?
No. It would be in the freezer.
I'm hoping my mother's listening to this because my mom puts ice in her Sauvignon Blanc.
But I wouldn't fault you for it.
Okay. All right. I don't fault anybody else. I'll fault my mother because that's what I have to do. Second question. A lot of times in the tasting room, we get asked about that really well-known grassy bell pepper aroma that you tend to get in Sauvignon Blanc. Where does that come from?
So those aromas are from compounds called methoxypyrazines. And they're not only found in Sauvignon Blanc, but they're also found in some of the other varieties that we're tasting today. And so pyrazine levels can increase when the fruit is shaded and not adequately exposed to sunlight. And there can be some regional or some clonal variations as well. But since we have been talking about wine production back in the 1970s, Monterey County back then was known for having what was called the Monterey veggies. And this was due in part to a lot of our plantings being put on very fertile, the bottom of the valley floor. And so the vines just grew and grew and shaded the fruit. And they were trellised in what was called the California sprawl at the time. So the vigor of the shading, the vigor of these vines in these really fertile areas just caused, a lot of these pyrazine compounds to be very evident. In fact, in my early winemaking career, I had a salesperson ask me, "What is it with this Monterey fruit? Were they all planted on old broccoli fields?"
Ooh. That's not good. When I think about California sprawl, which is something I'd never heard of before, I'm thinking like a really cool dance move or a really terrible dance move. And I'm thinking this is something you would not start doing until you have finished a bottle of Sauvignon Blanc, and then you start doing the California sprawl. But this kind of broccoli wine. It's not something that people are getting now when they're drinking the wine, correct?
No, wine growers learned really early on what was causing this. And so a lot of the vineyards that were on these really heavy the fertile valley floors have been reverted to row crops. And a lot of our vineyards are now up on less fertile ground. And we've also learned how to trellis the grapes so that there's more sun exposure to the fruit. And that alleviates a lot of the problems with that.
Good to know. Although it sounds healthy to have like broccoli wine. So just like inject a little bit of that.
You can think you're drinking vegetables then.
I know, yeah. That would get your veggie fix in by having a glass of Sauvignon Blanc. That's going to be our new slogan. This vintage, the 2021 vintage, is completely done in stainless steel. So how would this affect the final product in the glass?
So when a winemaker ferments in stainless steel, you really have control over the temperature. We usually try to ferment this at about 50, 55 degrees Fahrenheit. It ferments slowly and allows a lot of those aromatic compounds to remain within the wine. It doesn't blow off like it would do if it was really warm. And also stainless steel doesn't impart any of the oak component that might overpower these really bright aromatics.
Okay, yeah, because it's like so delicious. You definitely don't want to overpower it. But we do also make a small amount of barreled Sauvignon Blanc in our reserve program. And I think we only did about 4 barrels of that. I think we're on our 2019 vintage, but that's going to give you a completely different profile, right?
That's true. We make just a really small amount. We've been using a very aromatic Italian clone that we have it up at our Riverview vineyard. And we put the juice into brand new French oak barrels and then allow it a native fermentation to take hold. And then as soon as the fermentation is completed, we put it into neutral barrels so that the oak doesn't overpower those bright aromatics. It's a really wonderful wine and really very different. I really encourage you to try it if you get the chance. You kind of get these wonderful bright aromatics of the Sauvignon Blanc, but just a subtle taste of that toasty oak.
Yeah, we're pouring that one in the caramel tasting right now.
Oh, goody.
It is, people absolutely love it. It's super fun and it's unique for Sauvignon Blanc for sure. Because let's see, it's almost 6 o'clock and I'm ready for dinner already. I think it's time to talk food pairing for the Sauvignon Blanc. Everybody here probably knows that I am down for a charcuterie plate, breakfast, lunch, or dinner. So I'm going to say I would definitely pair cheese with this Sauvignon Blanc. If I want to try to be healthy and saying it's a broccoli Sauvignon Blanc doesn't cut it, I'd probably put some goat cheese on a salad. And I also think it'd be really good with maybe like Thai food if I don't feel like cooking. So if my husband's watching this, he'll be like, what do you mean you never cook? But I think those would be some pairings for me. What would you pair this one with?
Well, when you first asked me that question, I said air, but all kidding aside, I think that the acidity and the aromatics of this wine, makes it really very versatile. But traditionally, I think this is paired most often with seafood.
Yeah, okay, now I'm thinking maybe some seared scallops would probably
be yum.
Pretty good with this. If you guys have any suggestions for what you would pair with this or what you're drinking with it now. I don't know. I saw Todd's down there drinking red wine, so he skipped the Sauvignon.
He's just moving right along.
Yes, he's ahead of us, but it's okay. We're going to get there. But while you guys all finish up what's in your glass with the Sauvignon Blanc, what I'm going to do is have our first trivia question. So if anyone hasn't done trivia with us, it's pretty easy. Basically, I'm going to give you a question, and as soon as I say the question, whoever types the correct answer into the chat button is going to win a prize. And the prize is this awesome Campfire Shied Vineyards mug. It is not dishwasher safe, so you have to wash it by hand, but it's really, really cool. Okay. Alrighty.
Well, you'd be camping, so you wouldn't be using the dishwasher.
Right, exactly. Camping only. Or you could put some Sauvignon Blanc in it and head down to the beach and everyone will think you're just drinking coffee. I've never done that before, I swear. Okay, so the question is, remember you have to type it into the chat. How many bones did Evel Knievel break in 1972 after clearing 35 cars? I need the Jeopardy music. Start Googling, guys. Start Googling. Somebody's got to win this. I'll keep it. Come on, somebody get on their Google machine.
I had to look it up. He lived for quite some time afterwards. He didn't pass away until 2007. So
yeah, that'd be a pretty kind of gnarly trivia question if it killed him. So
yeah.
All right, somebody get on Google.
That was too hard of a question.
I hope Marta came up with this question. People are saying 0, Marta. If 0 is the answer.
No. You want me to spill the beans?
Who are we gonna give the mug to? No one's gonna get this? All right, somebody get on Google now. I'm gonna give you guys like 15 more seconds. 1972, Evel Knievel.
35 cars.
And it was when he cleared 35 cars. Yeah, I should have poured myself more wine for this.
Da, 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 da. Okay, well, I guess nobody cares how many bones he broke, but as somebody said, it was a lot, and that's
we're gonna
really
give it
true.
to the person that we're gonna give it to Kim. I think Kim said it was a lot.
Okay, so it was 93 bones, and you know how many you have in the body?
Wait, Todd, did Todd say 93 after or before you just said
it? Before. Okay, all right, go
okay,
Todd.
We'll give it to him. At this point, we'll give it away. Okay.
Yay!
Yeah.
So, that's like half the bones in your body. So he must have needed a glass of that red wine, Todd, when he cleared those cars.
93 bones. That's incredible. Okay. We got your name down, Todd. I hope you like camping. We've got a little cup for you. Okay. All right, let's move on now. My job again is just to make sure that we have wine in our glass. I have finished this trying to wait for somebody to guess 93. So we are going to move on to the 2019 Merlot that we just released. This comes from our San Lucas and our Hacienda vineyard. It spends 18 months in oak. About 15% of that's going to be new oak. So while everybody goes ahead, swirls, sips, let's talk a little bit about Merlot.
So Merlot is an ancient cross, and it's a cross between Cabernet Franc and a really obscure variety called Magdalene Noir de Charente. And since one of its parents is Cabernet Franc, Merlot is actually a half sibling of Cabernet Sauvignon. So you see the family is kind of getting connected here. It is thought that the name Merlot actually comes from the name for a small blackbird that really showed a fondness for these grapes.
Yeah, and when I first had Marta tell me about this, I was just thinking Merlot, but it's spelled Merlau, which I think is a pretty awesome name, and perhaps a name for my next puppy. I've always liked the name Pinot for a puppy, so I think I'm going to do like maybe 2 puppies, Pinot and Merlot. I digress. Let's talk about how Merlot production increased in popularity in the 90s.
Well, there was significant increase in US acreage and in wine consumption after 60 Minutes aired The French Paradox in 1991. And for years, the wine industry had been trying to get some, educate people about the health benefits of wine. So when Morley Safer hosted that segment that discussed the contrasting diets of France, where the average person consumes 40 pounds of cheese annually to that of the United States, and yet France doesn't have the heart disease that we have here in the United States. And so his answer to that paradox was that they drink a lot more red wine. And that ultimately led to increased consumption of not only Merlot, but all red varietals in the United States.
Okay, so we've learned a lot today. We've learned that you drink Sauvignon Blanc to get your broccoli intake. And if you want to lose weight, you need to eat more cheese and drink more red wine. So you're welcome, everybody. What's interesting though is kind of how quickly Merlot gained popularity. It also lost popularity, and I'm sure some of you know that that was due to the very popular and well-known movie Sideways. Um, I'll go ahead and spare everybody the famous quote because we are recording this, and so I'm not going to curse. But needless to say that Merlot definitely took a dip, and then production of Pinot kind of took its place.
Yeah, that 2004 movie Sideways not only catapulted Pinot onto the stage, but it sadly diminished Merlot in the eyes of many consumers. However, currently, Merlot is the second most widely produced black grape in the world. And you might be surprised to know that it is the largest production. The largest production in Bordeaux is, in fact, 66% of all the grapes grown in Bordeaux is Merlot.
That is interesting. I feel like a lot of people, they think of Bordeaux, they think Cab. And I don't think everybody knows that Merlot is planted more than Cab, which is super interesting. I'm glad to know people are still drinking it since it's super delicious. Lisa said this is one of her favorite shied wines. And I think we might have tasted the Merlot during one of these virtuals in the beginning, like 2 years ago. And I might have mentioned that this Merlot is what got me to join the wine club, because for the price point, it just, gosh, it tastes like a $60 bottle of wine. It's absolutely fantastic. Since we mentioned the 70s being the beginning of shied, again, I wasn't around in the 70s, but anybody that grew up in that era might be familiar with what the most popular wine of the time was, and that was a Mateus Rosé. So not sure if anybody remembers Mateus. I was playing that song when we first started on my phone. We were a little bit not high quality production. So I was playing the song. So I don't know if you guys heard the lyrics, but when we were playing the song, it was, I get juiced on Mateus and just let loose. And that song came out, Elton John, back in 1973, that song came out. So kind of a fun fact.
I know, I definitely drank my share of it back then. And it's so, as with most things, just trends just kind of come and go.
I had a photo and I just completely forgot till right now. And Marta, you're off the hook. Marta actually sent me a photo of herself in 1972 and I forgot it. So that might have to be on the May bucket list. I'm just realizing that right now. Okay. So in the 70s, when Al Scheid produced founded Scheid Vineyards, at the time it wasn't Pinot Noir and Chardonnay that Monterey County is known for now. It was actually more French Colombard, Chenin Blanc, and Ruby Cabernet were the popular plantings back then. But the varieties, they're just not that common anymore. They didn't do well, but again, they just sort of fell out of fashion.
Yeah, they kind of fell out of fashion with my mini skirt and my bell bottoms,
Which I'm sorry, I don't have a photo for you guys.
Well, the 70s was a time of growth, really, in Monterey County. A lot of vineyards were planted, wineries were established. It was also the era when the Judgment of Paris put California on the world map of winemaking. For those of you that don't know, that in 1976, Stephen Spurrier put on a wine tasting and compared French wines with California wines, and the California wines came in the winners. And this forever changed the long-held belief that only France had the proper climate and growing conditions to produce truly great wines. So we've really come a long ways.
Yeah, we definitely have. Let's get back to 2022, what we're drinking now. What aromas are you getting, or is anybody else getting on this 2019 Merlot?
Well, I get a lot of black fruit, blackberries and some blueberries. A lot of vanilla and chocolate too, as well as that toasty oak. But the tannins are soft, but yet the wine still really has a lot of good structure.
Yeah, I definitely agree with the description on that. I'm kind of getting a little bit of a berry pie and definitely those toasty notes. I feel like this would be a super food friendly wine due to the varieties positioned sort of in the middle of the red wine spectrum. So moderate tannins, moderate acidity. I think a lot of what you could pair this with would probably be even similar to what you'd pair with a Pinot Noir. In this cold weather, maybe a shepherd's pie or a beef stew for me.
Oh, those would taste great. Those would taste great, especially on a cold evening. And I especially like Merlot with like lamb chops or a pork loin. I think a lot of people find Merlot much more approachable and than Cabernet Sauvignon, because inherently Merlot doesn't have that quite the tannin structure that Cabernet Sauvignon does. In fact, Merlot is often blended into a Cabernet Sauvignon to soften the cab, or vice versa. Cabernet Sauvignon is blended into a Merlot to give the Merlot some structure.
Awesome. Let's go ahead and again, if you guys, what you would pair this with, what you're getting, I would love to know. If you have any questions for the winemaker, put it in the chat. But before we go ahead and finish with the Cab Franc, I would like to, because we said we picked these three wines to deal with Bordeaux. What makes the climate like the climate here in Monterey? The similarities between Bordeaux and Monterey.
I think the biggest similarities are the marine influence. Pardon me, us with the Pacific Ocean and Bordeaux with the Atlantic. We have talked before about how that influence allows growers in Monterey County to produce so many different varieties. Both Bordeaux and Monterey are affected by the cool climate that descends from the north and that affects us. And although Bordeaux is a more northerly latitude, kind of similar to maybe where Seattle might be, because it's bisected by the Gironde River, which has a warming influence, it has a very, very similar climate to what we have here.
But we do get the opportunity to kind of play around with more varieties than Bordeaux, which has a bit more regulations, right, on what can be planted.
Oh, yes, absolutely. So, in most of Europe, you can only plant certain varieties in certain places in order to be able to be considered the highest quality wine. Whereas in Monterey, or anywhere in the United States for that matter, we can plant whatever we want to if we think it will grow. And I think that's why that there's so many varieties planted in Monterey County. I think at last count, there was 53 different varieties planted in the county.
Yeah, that's kind of amazing. Thank you for that comparison. And I think we should do one last trivia question, although not so sure, but I will do one last trivia question for everybody. So I'm going to put this photo up to set the scene. Let's go ahead. Right, I'm not sure. The question is not who is that, but take a look. The same rules are going to apply. First person to type in the correct answer wins. And this time we're going to be giving away an awesome Shide candle. So I'll show you a photo. So we use these bottles were used in the tasting room, and then we recycle them and turn them into 100% soy candles. Okay, so Todd, you said you can't see the chat. Okay, perfect. So the question is, and for anybody who doesn't know, it's Al Shide, who is the person in this photo. And the question is, where did Al Shide go to business school?
It's such a great picture of Al when he was young.
We got it super quick. Wait, Marta, we got it super quick.
Oh.
Jennifer Williams got it Harvard. Yes. Yay.
Very
We
good.
got Jennifer Williams. We're gonna send you a candle. Yay, yay. Okay,
All
sorry.
right.
All right.
Although Al has had many careers in his life, I think one of my favorite stories from Al's past is that he used to repossess cars when he was young. And it's life has such a funny way of leading us all into our various professions. I wanted to be a marine biologist in my first year of college until I found out that there was blood involved. And then I went into botany and grapes and wine.
I think I speak for everybody here when I say we are all glad that you did not get into botany and that you chose wine instead. So thank you. My career path obviously changed too. I have to admit, working with wine is a bit nicer than my previous career as a probation officer, where I used to arrest people for drinking. So I did a bit of a 180 there. But I think we're good with our little trip to the past. Let's get back on track. Got to make sure that our glasses are full. And let's go ahead and fill up our glass with some of the 2018 Reserve Cabernet Franc. I was super excited about this variety. It's the first time Shide Vineyards has done this as a single variety. This we did less than 100 cases of, so super, super limited. Will probably be gone soon. For those of you who want to order any, I'm probably going to hoard the last few bottles.
No.
Oh, okay. Or Marta. We'll share some so we can let the club members have.
That's good.
These grapes were picked from our Hames Valley vineyard, and they were aged for 22 months in French oak. So with less than 100 cases produced, how many acres do we even have of Cab Franc?
We really don't have very much at all. We have a half an acre down at our Hames Valley vineyard. And so this is a really very small production. It usually goes into the Claret, which is a blend of our Bordeaux varieties, the Cab, the Merlot, Cab Franc, and so forth. But 2018 was just a really great year for Cab Franc. Sometimes this variety can be very acidic because it ripens late in the year. It can also have some of those pyrazines that we talked about earlier. So it can be on the bell, have a lot of that vegetative bell peppery kind of characteristic. But this year is just really exceptional. I just think it's a really wonderful wine.
Can you tell us a little bit? I think people are more familiar with Cabernet Sauvignon. So can you tell us a bit about Cabernet Franc?
So Cab Franc was imported, like many of the varieties in California, in the late 1890s, and it was often interplanted with Cabernet Sauvignon. But it is really a very ancient variety, but thought to be indigenous to the Bordeaux region. Through DNA analysis, it has been determined that Cabernet Franc is actually the parent of several of the more well-known varieties. And that gives you an indication of how old it actually is. The Cabernet Franc is a parent of Cabernet Sauvignon, a parent of Merlot, and a parent of Carmenere. So you can see that Cabernet Franc has been an important variety that has led to many other varieties. So one big happy grape family, like we were talking about. Also, I just wanted to bring up about the word Sauvignon, because you see Sauvignon referred to in many different varieties. And the word Sauvignon actually comes from the French for a word for sauvage, which meant wild, as in I found it in the wild, grapes. So you could, although you'll see Sauvignon attached to the name, it doesn't necessarily mean they're related. It just means that at some point in history, they were an ancient wild grape.
All right, I'm getting even more names for my puppies. So if I have a badly behaved puppy, I will call it Sauvage.
I love that one, Merlot Sauvage.
Only, yeah, it's Merlot, and then when he's not behaving, Sauvage is first name. Well, I'll call him first and last name. Love it. What are we getting on the Cabernet Franc? What are you getting on this wine?
Well, I just think the bright black fruit is just really, really wonderful. You get some chocolate, and there's a lot of that smoky oak characteristic, the pepper, spice notes to it. And it really has great structure from all the tannins.
I'm kind of even getting like a bit of a hint of violet on it. But when you taste it, it really has such a round, velvety mouthfeel to it. I do think that this is probably one of those wines that will get better as it ages too.
I agree. It will age well. And, that's one of the questions I probably get asked most often is, how can you tell if a wine is going to age? And since my father was a builder, I think about tannins in wine like the 2x4s in the structure of a house. If you are missing that support in the frame of the house, it's really not going to last very long. And tannins in wine are what's holding the wines together. And it makes it more easily to hold it together and to last for much longer. And because of those rich tannins, I think that this wine is going to really age well. And because of those tannins, I think that it's going to pair well with fatty foods. As we've talked, if any of you were with us on the chocolate pairing, that fat pairs well with the chocolate because the tannins bind with the fat molecules and kind of act as a palate cleanser. So I think it would taste great with a steak or anything grilled, really. What kind of food are you leaning towards?
Well, I don't know if you're asking me or
Yeah. Well, anybody.
I would do maybe like a yummy lamb kebab. That kind of sounds really delicious. I'd love to know what everybody else would do with this one, but I'm thinking a lamb kebab.
A lamb kebab. Well, in various parts of the world, Cabernet Franc is not necessarily made in this style. In the Loire Valley in France, it's made as a rosé. And in parts of Canada, it's actually made as an ice wine. And an ice wine is made when the berries are actually frozen on the vine picked in December or January. And the resulting wine is a dessert wine. So although this wine would taste great with that kebab, depending on the style of wine that Cabernet Franc was made into, it might taste really different if you had a sweet ice wine.
Yeah, I guess we're giving everybody options depending on what your palate is. So as you guys finish up these wines and pour yourself perhaps another glass, maybe the rest of the bottle, depending on where we are in the night, there are two things I did want to touch base on for all of our club members. I was first hoping, Marta, you could talk a little bit about what is going on right now in our vineyards. I think it's really nice to bring everyone to the source of what is in our glass.
So we have had bud break in the vineyard. And this is always an exciting time for grape growers. But also a nervous time because there is still the possibility of spring frosts, and spring frost can really destroy a crop for that year. We have a picture here. So this is a flower cluster it's not started flowering yet, but if you visited a vineyard now and you saw this, lots of people look at that and say, oh, it's baby grapes. But actually that's the grape primordia, because those will turn into flowers that are really kind of nondescript, and those ultimately will turn into grapes. So it's a really beautiful time to visit the vineyards. The grapes all look very neat and tidy, and I encourage you all to come and visit our vines.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because from here there's still so much that has to really go right, and such a labor of love still has to go into cultivating these grapes into what will eventually be this beautiful liquid we get to drink now. So thank you for that update. The last thing I wanted to touch base on for everybody is upcoming events. We are celebrating a 50-year anniversary, so we have to make sure that our schedule is super jam-packed. For actual dates and links to RSVP, definitely go to the events page that would be on our website. We're just so excited to have things back up and running. But I know for a fact we've got a family-style dinner coming up at the Woody's Airport. That's in Monterey. I know Kim and Lynn are already signed up for that, which would be awesome. We even have I had to write everything down here. We've got a Giants game where we're going to be taking everybody to a Giants game with some transportation, drinks on the road. not the person driving. That's coming up. And then even a Blues and Bites Day in July in the vineyards. And everybody knows about that blowout harvest party in October, which is going to be absolutely amazing. That's just the beginning. So definitely look forward for that. And also, we would love to throw in a virtual for our members that are not in the area. So please send us any requests. It seems like Marta's on a junk food kick and thinks a junk food virtual pairing would be fun. So that might be in the near future as well. It doesn't look like we have too many more questions. So I think we'll just say thank you for joining us. If you didn't order the virtual, but you were interested in trying the 3 wines, this does get recorded and we put it on a website. And like I said, that Cab Franc is super low production. We'll have it up on the website until Friday if anybody did want to purchase it. But Miss Marta, would you like to go ahead and close us out for the night?
Cheers, everyone. Have a wonderful week. Nice to see all your smiling faces.
All right. Cheers, guys. And we'll be back for the next one in May and the May Club release. Thanks for tuning in. Cheers. Mom.
Bye.